Welcome to Planetary Calendar. We're Ralph and Lonnie Diamicis, and here is the forecast for November 2017. We're going to start with Lonnie reading my forecast and hopefully not flubbing it.
That's a good hope. He writes it, I read it. This is another Get Things Done month, with most planets direct and the smallest speed bumps all in the first 7 days. The full moon on the 3rd is marked a black box for general chaos, but it has some good qualities. The separating sun conjunct Jupiter carries the sense that great things are possible if enough effort is expended. Venus in Libra, its rulership, is conjunct the asteroid Vesta at the feminine archetype star Spica, which massively empowers women, inspiring great productivity. Meanwhile, Saturn is at the galactic center, transmitting a spiritual architecture for us to build with. But Uranus, opposite Venus, means outbursts and personal violence, so tread lightly and speak kindly. Fortunately, Venus is strongly placed, so love and justice will likely prevail. Mercury enters Sagittarius on the 5th, restoring people's lost sense of humor.
Thankfully.
Venus leaves idyllic Libra on the 7th for determined Scorpio, joining Jupiter, so discussions become actions. All of this creates great momentum to bring projects to fruition on the 8th with Sun trine Moon. On the 13th, Venus conjuncts Jupiter, so mix business and pleasure, networking, deferred apologies with those who can help you in the future. The powerhouse new moon on the 18th is an iron fist in a velvet glove. Hard-driving Scorpio expressed through diplomatic Mars in Libra. Heal wounds, make allies, spread your vision for the future. The sun entering Sagittarius on the 21st shifts the balance of power towards Saturn, so apply the brakes a bit. Coincidentally, Mercury is slowing down, so relax, take a breath, and take advantage of the respite. On the 22nd, Neptune turns direct, supporting Jupiter with visionary inspiration, so plan your next steps.
So, this is quite a month we have here, isn't it?
I like that sense of humor returning with Mercury in Sagittarius, because Mercury in Sagittarius is said to be a difficult position for Mercury, but since it's my position for my natal Mercury, I kind of like its fun, punster quality. So maybe some of that humor that we've been looking for will return.
Well, I think that the Mercury in Sagittarius has the great advantage of a unique perspective. And there's actually a number of very well-known astrologers who have that position, so it can't be all bad.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting because Mercury kind of thinks it's Jupiter anyway. Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, so Mercury likes to act like Jupiter, you know, suffers from a little bit of that hoof and mouth disease. You know, when you open up your mouth and just any funny, punny thing that might come to mind might just pop out and you say, did I say that out loud? So that's kind of Mercury and Sagittarius.
Yeah, but that's like Jupiter, you know, Sagittarians oftentimes will cause problems by saying the wrong thing without realizing. With Mercury, when they say the wrong things, the Geminis and Virgos, they know it's the wrong thing. They're saying it anyway.
Oh,
yeah, that's the difference.
I didn't know that was your perception.
Oh, yes, that's
But
the
you
difference.
know, I mean, people forgive the Sagittarius energy so quickly because it's so lovable. I mean, you know,
yes,
it's very open and inclusive and expansive, and you know, so you get to believe that they were joking.
Where Mercury and Gemini, in comparison, just develop a reputation. So, but it's a very interesting month because it starts off with that full moon on the 3rd, where there's a lot going on there. You know, Lonnie, you know, described it in the forecast, but there's a lot going on. You know, you have the Venus opposite Uranus, so it's very charged on a personal level, and then you have, of course, the Sun opposite Moon, but you also have the Moon trine Neptune. Neptune's a huge planet, so I'm sorry, the Sun trine Neptune, and so there's a real deep desire to get into spiritual issues. And so I think that where all this energy is being brought up, we have a strong sense at that time in the first part of the month that there's a deep underlying spiritual message that we need to be getting out of this at the same time.
And I think it's a little bit tragic to have a black box day on any day where the moon is in Taurus for most of the day, because that's my natal moon, that Taurus moon. We call it the foodie moon.
Yes.
So if the day just gets too overwhelmingly black box for you, make reservations and have a nice glass of wine, and you'll feel better in the morning.
I think the 3rd is in fact the perfect day to go out to lunch. I think with Sanduda, I mean, it's the perfect day to go out to lunch because you will need time to discuss things. And when's the best time to discuss things? Over lunch. Yes?
Exactly, it's hard time
Yes.
in the signatures of midday and midnight, and so
Yes.
it's a good time to have a heart to heart. And I also like the fact that Venus is sextile Saturn.
Yes.
So if you're having a conversation and it has to entail sort of the masculine versus the feminine outlook, or it has to do with something in the arts or beauty or real estate or food, and you have to speak with or get cooperation from somebody in authority, it kind of works really well. So like you said, it's kind of, there's always the silver lining even in the most challenging of days.
Exactly, and especially because Venus is in rulership in Libra, so she's very powerfully placed. And Saturn and Libra actually do very well together. In fact, Saturn is exalted in Libra, one of the ruling signs of Venus. So,
And isn't Friday Venus's day?
Friday is
And
Venus's
it's on
day.
Friday the 3rd, so
Exactly.
all things Venusian should be supported on even this black box day.
I remember one of our children saying that her favorite thing was going out to lunch with people she cared about.
Exactly.
So she has Libra rising, not surprisingly. So, and then of course on the 5th you have the Mercury enters Sagittarius, which changes communications. It's been in Scorpio, kind of hard driving. Suddenly it develops a better perspective. Then Venus enters Scorpio on the 7th, and this really makes a complex dynamic because you have Jupiter in Scorpio. We talked about that last month. Jupiter stays in a sign for a year. So now Jupiter is in this hard driving Scorpio. But because it's in Scorpio, it has to defer to Mars, who is the ruler. Mars rules 2 signs, Scorpio and Aries. It's the feminine ruler, so it has to defer to it. But now, when Venus goes into Scorpio, the energy goes from Jupiter to Mars, back to Venus, and back to Mars. And suddenly, anything Jupiter has to do, he has to discuss with both Venus and Mars. Well, Venus and Mars are 2 of the most intimate planets, not surprisingly. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So suddenly, any discussion about power and relationships is going to come down to a personal level. And of course, if we've been following the news recently, this is something that's going through the news all the time now. In fact, with the hashtag #MeToo, it's showing up every place. Now, we do 2 forecasts. We do one forecast a year ahead that you can find through our website, Space and Time, and it's tied into the calendar. But then this one we do the month ahead. So it's kind of interesting to compare the 2 to see what were we saying a year ago and what's actually happening.
Well, and of course, the one that we do for the year is kind of a broad overview, and then these kind of zero in on the transits of just that particular month. But they do kind of work together, of course.
And we get the great advantage of actually seeing what's happening because, astrology is not a dead art. It's not isolated from people. It is people. It's the active expression of spirit through living people. That's what the Hermetic tradition is about.
And that's why I love doing these forecasts so close in time to when they're happening, because we can interject some of the current events into the forecast that was written well in advance.
Exactly.
And you get to see, if you have the calendar, you get to see the forecast as it was written a year ago. But if you get to watch the broadcast or the tape of the broadcast, you get to really bring the current events into it. So
yeah, and as you can see in this first part of the month, the first few days, it's all about the feminine, and that's really, we're doing this in the later part of October. Boy, is it all about the feminine right now, and where you're going to really see it expressed is on the 8th, around the 8th, the 7th, 8th, 9th. Why? Because on the 8th, first of all, the moon is in Cancer, the feminine ruling sign of the moon, so it's very powerful. The sun is in Scorpio, a feminine sign. And it's the moon trine the sun, which is after the full moon. And this is the time when all the energy that's been gathered up by the full moon goes boom and lands on the table. It's kind of that cornucopia with all the fruit turning out, the vegetables landing on the table. That's that trine between the sun and the moon after the full moon. So you're going to see a lot of stuff expressed at that time in a very positive way. And it's going to be followed up the next day on the 9th with the sun sextile Pluto. So it's going to be a bit of a boom, boom. Like there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out, and next day it's going to be like one more shot as a whole bunch of stuff that relates to this first part of the month. It's really going to be expressed.
Well, and Pluto brings to light things that are hidden or things that people would rather want to have hidden. So it's kind of a good clearing for, these transits with the lights to bring out these hidden issues before you go on and take action. You always want to know the hidden details that might be there. And before you go on, I know it's not footnoted, but I have to say one thing about this lovely White Circle Day on Veterans Day on the 11th of November. I just love that line up on top of the number, meaning that all of those planets are making beneficial aspects to the moon throughout the day, and that's one of the main reasons for the White Circle Day. But they look like a line of the Rockettes up there, and I just think it's going to be a great day. So
Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. Ta-da!
There you go.
Yeah.
You got them all.
Exactly.
Except Mercury.
So, and
Mercury doesn't need the help.
In fact, this month has a whole bunch of White Circle days. So there's going to be a bunch of smooth sailing. The 11th, the 16th, the 17th, the 21st, and the 25th are White Circle days. And there's only one black box day, which is the 3rd, which is the full moon. And this is not so much of a problematic day as I would say a powerful day. It's a very powerful full moon. And it's followed up by that new moon on the 18th. It's that, what was it? The iron fist inside of the velvet glove, and that's a very, very powerful amount of energy concentrating toward there. So a lot of stuff is going to be expressed in the first couple of weeks, and then it's going to wind down, but it's not going to lose its potency.
Well, and that black box, people say, oh, black box day, that's got to be a bad day. It's not that it's a bad day. It's just that if you were going to start something new or you were going to make a new effort in some kind of endeavor or relationship or something like that, there's just so much going on that you can't predict that you wouldn't necessarily that as that day to start something, because it may not be smooth sailing. Something could just sort of come out of nowhere, especially since, there's a Venus Uranus opposition and the sun moon opposition, so your goals might be out of sync with your emotions and things like that. So it's just not the best day to start something.
There could be arguments. There could definitely be arguments. People on, like one of the secrets on that day, if you're going out to see people, don't sit across from each other, because it's going to be too easy to take the two sides of a point of view. Sit cat-a-corner to each other, or sit on the same side and look the same direction. Which is a technique they use in Japanese businesses. Everyone sits on the same side of the table, and they're all facing the same direction.
So they have the same point of view.
Same point of view. If you want to get people on the same side with you, sit on the same side of the booth with them. That's simple. It's cozy.
So I think we're up to, the sun enters Sagittarius on the 21st, another White Circle Day.
Just in time for Thanksgiving on the 23rd, which is one of the things about Sagittarius is the sign of generosity, abundance. It's the sign of the archer. Why? Because it was this time of the year that the leaves had come down. So it was a great time for the hunter, because they can now see the animals more easily when the leaves had come down. So that's why it was traditionally the time of the hunter, the archer. So, and when the archer is there, the hunter is there, what happens? You have the feast. Why? Because you can actually get the great roast, the great meats, And then you have the White Circle Day on the 25th. Once again, a bunch of great planets and a good aspect to the moon. And the rest of the month really cools out after that. Everything's concentrated from that full moon on the 3rd to the new moon on the 18th. And by the time you get to Thanksgiving, it should be a very nice day. It's the sun sextile the moon, right? And this is between Aquarius and Sagittarius, both very social, very, very abundant. Watch out for drinking too much, and no discussing politics.
Well, and the help for that is the fact that we missed pointing out that footnote H that comes between the day that the sun changes sign and goes into Sagittarius and Thanksgiving on the Thursday. That Wednesday Neptune actually goes direct.
Oh, yes.
So, when Neptune is retrograde, you have a lot more tendency to overindulge or delude yourself into saying, oh, I can still drive. I had that extra, and have that extra glass of wine or something like that, But with Neptune going direct, it puts you a little bit more in touch with that kind of Neptune energy than, Neptune always feels a little bit like it's retrograde because it's an internalized kind of an energy. So when it is retrograde, it really goes deep in there, and it's very hard to kind of bring those kinds of feelings and ideas to light. So when it goes direct, use it in a positive way. It's inspiration, it's idealism, it's, all these beneficial things that you can send out, even though these feelings that have created those ideas for you have been internalized for so long, especially during the retrograde.
Exactly. And then the month pretty much wraps up. I mean, that's really what's going on this month in November. If you want to see more about the month, you want to watch this forecast and the additional shows. And then we have, once again, our little forecast we do specifically for the calendar. Go to spaceandtime.com. Look for current forecast. And you'll get more insights about what's actually going on this month, and especially how it relates to you. Remember, the calendar, Planetary calendar is published since 1949, and it was designed to be personalized. There's actually a whole tool in there that allows you to personalize it for you based upon your sun sign or even your moon sign. So
we love the opportunity to kind of give life to the written word, the printed word. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next time. So we're Ralph and Lonnie D'Amicus with another Planetary Minute, or 10, about astrological subjects. Take it away, Ralph.
we're going to talk about other points in the horoscope that have significance beyond what's your sun sign and what's your moon sign and such. And it's funny because, astrology means the logic of the stars. And yet what we're normally talking about is, of course, the planets. Though in ancient times they didn't differentiate between the stars and the planets in that way, but they recognized that there was a difference between the fixed stars, as we call them, and things like Antares and Betelgeuse and such, and the wandering stars, things like Mercury and Venus and Mars. That was what they called them, the wandering stars, and then there were the fixed stars. Well, these fixed stars, these giant, suns, that many of them are much, much larger than our own sun, do have significance, and they've been recorded for centuries and centuries by pretty much every single culture.
And they're sort of the backdrop over which the planetary motions happen. And their influence is very strongly felt as we get the energy from the planet through a filter that has received this energy from what is basically amounts to these big, radio telescopes or radio signal transmitters in the sky. So there's points that people know: Spica, Polaris, the North Star, the stars in certain constellations, the Big Dipper, Orion, and we're fairly familiar with some of them, and some of them have very interesting stories and histories, and the energy filters through them in a very interesting way. And then in a forecast that we did for November, we mentioned the galactic center. So that's another point that has a big influence on the actions and the interpretations of the planets.
Exactly. And typically the ones that really set you off are the ones that are along the ecliptic. And those are the ones that are where the planets travel. So there's certain stars that are right along that line. And there's 4 stars which are known as the royal stars. And they at one time were aligned with north, south, east, and west. And I say at one time because the precession of the equinox, they've actually shifted a bit. But it was also at times when after an earthquake or after during massive eruptions, when the sky got very, very cloudy for long periods of times, these were the brighter stars that you could see even when the sky was obscured. So there's certain stars that are considered very important because they're very, very bright. One of the stars that Lonnie mentioned is Spica. And Spica is at 23 degrees Libra. And it is where the Virgin and the constellation Virgo, which is the largest constellation, which was known before that as the Great Goddess, is holding a grain in her hand.
A spike of wheat.
A spike of wheat. And it is the brightest star in the constellation. Now, this is significant because realize that our modern civilization moved from the Paleo era to the modern era basically because of the ability to cultivate grains. So this is a very, very powerful thing. And what's interesting is that when people have major planets, a sun, a moon, maybe a Jupiter, aligned with Spica, one of the things that comes out in them is that they're very prolific. They're just like, people who are writers are like copy machines. Paper just spits out of them. Musicians who are tremendously prolific. Spica was a big player in that case. And so it's interesting that when you have a forecast that's going on where something's lined up with Spica, you recognize that there's going to be a lot of energy generated there.
Right, right. Some of these other fixed stars, these royal stars.
Right. Antares is the classic. Antares is a red giant. It's so huge it would probably encompass a major portion of our solar system. It's a very aggressive star. And what the name means actually, Antares, means like ours. Ours is Mars. So in other words, it was a big red star, kind of aggressive like Mars. They always recognized that Mars had a lot of aggressive energy. How do you recognize this stuff?
A warlike quality.
Warlike quality. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason is that the shepherds, who were many of the original astrologers, would see how Mars affected their flocks. When Mars was in certain positions, the flocks would get rammy. It's not that surprising. And Antares is like that. That's at 8 degrees Sagittarius. And you find that many people who are very martial, are great generals, people who like being in the chaos of war, have planets at Antares.
Exactly. And when that star is prominent in transiting charts as well, you find maybe that your temper is easier to ignite, or other people around you are a little bit more testy when that comes around in transits, because you see that it has that effect as a filter through the other transiting planets.
Like, for instance, when Mars is transiting over Antares, or sometimes Uranus transiting over Antares, there tend to be a lot of outbreaks of violence in terms of military actions, but also random violence. People acting out in horrible ways. Mars is triggered by this planet.
And people who use an area of astrology called mundane astrology use this to time events. They say, oh, this situation is happening right now, and does it have anything to do with this alignment of Antares with Mars or Antares with Uranus? And we'll go back historically to other periods in history where this same alignment occurred, and see if we can find similar activity that would relate to what was going on now. So it has to do with mundane events in the world.
One of the classic stars, of course, is Regulus, which is the heart of the lion.
Makes everybody smile.
Right, exactly. And it actually does show up many times, either at the rising or connected to the sun or to the moon, of people who were great leaders.
Or royals.
Royals, exactly. So, and it's symbolic of the great heart, of great popularity, but also the great desire for popularity, the desire to be the center of attention.
Exactly. I was going to say, if you have it prominently in your chart, either at the midheaven or the rising or conjunct your Venus or in another position that makes it really personally held for you, you really do need to be treated like royalty. I mean, that's just logical. It's
a very creative position. And right now it's about at 29 degrees Leo, 1 degree Virgo. It's right on that line, this discussion about where it is. Because remember, when you're talking about the position of the stars related to, there's two zodiacs after all. There's the sidereal zodiac, which is the stellar zodiac, and there's the tropical zodiac, which is the planetary zodiac, and they fit together like two wheels in the clock. And so when you're figuring that out, sometimes there's a little variation there in terms of where it is. But it's right at that transition line.
We need to do an astrological minute or 10 about the difference between sidereal and tropical. That'll be something we'll look for soon. But
meanwhile, go on the line and look that up.
We've got the fourth star you wanted to talk about. We have Regulus, Antares, Spica.
There's Fomalhaut as well, and there's which is another one of the four royal stars, and it tends to have great sense of nobility. But I think it's what's a really interesting star that we should talk about because we're here in wine country is Vindia Mitrix. And it's at, I think, 9 degrees Libra, as I call it, 9 or 10 degrees Libra. And it's the grape gatherer. Now, it's a woman and she's gathering grapes. What's funny is you find it in the charts of many people who are involved in the wine business, but you also find it in people who have problems with drinking or drinking too much. It's the grape gatherer, so it's
Big
really
surprise.
not surprised. Vindia Mitrix, and you'll find little things like that. For instance, the star Hercules, I don't recall what the degree is of it, but it showed up in the stars in the charts of famous racehorses. Which makes sense. I mean, a racehorse is a Herculean type of event. Now, what star were you think we want to talk about?
Well, there's another star that came to my mind, but I don't think that's the one that we usually talk about either. But I thought Alpha Serpentis is an interesting star to talk about. It's in Scorpio, and it's close to 20 degrees, 21 degrees Scorpio. And it's irreverently called the poison star.
Right.
So if you have that star next to or in a position that supports a personal planet, you should look for toxins in your environment or exposure and, a time of life. If it's Mercury, it might be early in life, or Venus, in the home. If you have it in the fourth house, you might look for hidden toxins in the home, because when we see that position prominent in people's charts, we often don't ask them if they're allergic to something. We ask them what they're allergic to, and we give them a pen so they can write a big list. Yeah. So that's another interesting star for you to think about.
And the final one we have to mention, we can't leave out, is Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky. It's called the dog star. It's at 13 degrees Cancer currently. If that shows up in your chart, it shows a great connection to the divine. Which isn't that nice? So
that's a perfect way to end.
Yep.
We'll see you next time with another astrological minute or 10 from Ralph and Lonnie.